My wife cheated on me and said, "Open relationships are normal," when I filed for divorce. She tried to take everything. I remember the exact moment my marriage turned into a business meeting. It was a Tuesday. Because of course it was. Nothing dramatic ever happens on a Saturday when you can at least pretend you have a life. My wife Marissa stood in our kitchen holding a mug she never actually drank from. She liked the idea of warm drinks more than the responsibility. She had that bright, calm smile she used when she wanted something. The same smile she used on waiters, landlords, and once on a police officer when our car registration had expired. It worked on everyone except me, because I lived with it. She said we need to talk, and I said we always need to talk, which was my way of saying I was tired. But sure, do your speech. She tilted her head like she was about to introduce a new menu item, and she said, "I think we should open our relationship, not because anything is wrong, but because we are adults and the world is modern." I blinked twice, not for drama, just to make sure I had not misheard her over the hum of our refrigerator that sounded like it was also disappointed. I asked, "What do you mean open? Like a window, like a book, like a trap door?" She rolled her eyes and said, "You know exactly what I mean." I told her I did, and I told her no. I said it calmly. The way you tell someone no when they ask to borrow your car and you know they treat speed limits like cute suggestions. I said I did not sign up for that. I said I wanted a marriage, not a subscription plan with premium add-ons. She laughed in that airy way that made everything sound like a joke. Except it was never a joke when it involved my life. She said, "You are being narrow-minded." I said, "No, I am being married-minded." She walked away from the conversation like it was a boring podcast episode, and I watched her leave the room, and something in me went still. Not broken, just alert. Like a smoke detector that has not started screaming yet but already smells the problem. The next few weeks felt normal on the outside. Dinners, errands, little arguments about laundry that were really about control. But the air tasted different. Marissa started guarding her phone like it was a rare jewel, and I am not proud of it, but I noticed, because when you live with someone you learn their patterns, and when their patterns change you either ask why or you start talking to your ceiling at night. She began dressing like she was going somewhere after going nowhere. Lipstick for grocery runs, perfume for the gym, and I had enough self-respect not to accuse without facts. Also, I had enough experience to know that accusations without proof are like throwing confetti at a fire. It looks active, but it does not help. One evening she came home an hour late, said traffic was insane, her hair was perfect, which is how I knew traffic was not the reason. Traffic does not style anyone. I asked where she was, casual, like I was asking what aisle the cereal was on. She said she grabbed a drink with coworkers. She said it like a line, smooth and practiced, and I felt my stomach do that slow drop like an elevator with bad intentions. I said, "Okay." Then I said, "Which coworkers?" And she paused just long enough to make my brain start collecting receipts. She named 2 people I had met once at a holiday party. I nodded. Then I said, "Funny. Because I ran into Nate from your office last week, and he said you mostly work remote now. He said the office is half empty." I watched her eyes flicker, just a flicker. But I have lived my whole life on flickers. She smiled again, that bright, calm smile, and she said, "You are interrogating me." I said, "No, I am listening for the truth." She accused me of being insecure, which is a classic move. Like when someone bumps your car and yells, "Why were you parked there?" I did not raise my voice. I did not slam anything. I just said I am not doing this open relationship thing. And I am also not doing the hidden relationship thing. Her face hardened, and she said, "You are holding us back." And then she said the line that still makes me laugh in the worst way. She said, "It is a modern world. We need to think more broadly." I told her I think broadly all the time. I think broadly about our mortgage, our savings, our future, our vows. She said vows are just words, and there it was. The moment I realized she had already left, She was just still physically in the house, like a guest who had overstayed. The next day, I did something I never thought I would do. I started paying attention the way accountants pay attention. Not emotional, not dramatic, just detailed. I checked dates, not messages. I did not want to become a spy in my own life. But I did want to stop being a volunteer in my own betrayal. I noticed charges on our shared card. Little ones that looked harmless. A boutique coffee place across town. A parking garage near a hotel I had never been to. Rideshare trips that started at our address and ended nowhere near her office. I did not confront her yet, because I wanted certainty, not arguments. And then one night she forgot her laptop on the couch. She always treated it like an organ, never left it behind. But she went to shower and her phone buzzed on the counter, and I saw the notification pop up. Just the preview line. Cannot wait for next time. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. I felt strangely calm, like my body had decided this was not a surprise. It was a confirmation. When she came out of the shower, I asked, "Who is next time?" She froze, then she sighed, like I had inconvenienced her, and she said, "I told you we need to evolve." I said, "No, you told me you wanted permission, and when you did not get it, you chose secrecy." She crossed her arms and said, "You are making it sound ugly." I said, "It is ugly." She said, "You are being dramatic." I said, "I am being awake." She looked at me like she had never really seen me, and in a way she had not. Because the version of me she liked was the one who cleaned up emotional messes quietly. I said, "We are done. We are getting a divorce." And for the first time, her calm smile slipped, just enough to show fear underneath. And she said, "You cannot do that." Like I was trying to cancel a gym membership. I said, "Watch me." She said, "You will regret it." And then she said something that made my skin go cold. She said, "If you do this, I will take everything." I stared at her and thought, oh, so it was not just modern, it was strategic. And right then my brain started working like a light turning on in a dark room. Because if she wanted everything, that meant she believed she had a plan. And if she had a plan, I needed one too. And I needed it fast. Because the next morning I woke up to an email from our bank about a password reset request I did not make. And that was when I knew this was about to get a lot more serious, and that I had been living with my opponent longer than I ever imagined. And I had no intention of losing my own life in court just because she discovered new buzzwords about modern love. And I also had a quiet advantage she had forgotten. I keep receipts, and I keep them in places people do not think to look. And that is where this story really starts. Right before she realized I was not the easy target she had married. I did not confront Marissa about the bank email right away. Not because I was scared, but because I had learned something important. The moment you show your hand to someone who plays games, they change the rules. I sat at the edge of our bed and stared at my phone like it had personally betrayed me. Password reset request. The polite language banks use when they want to say, someone is poking around in your life. I walked into the kitchen and Marissa was humming, which was almost impressive, because nothing says I am innocent like a cheerful soundtrack after you threaten to take everything. She said, "Good morning," like we were a normal couple and not two people standing on opposite sides of a cliff. I said morning, and I watched her carefully. She did not look guilty. She looked busy, like she had a schedule. That was when it hit me. Cheating was not the whole story. It was just the opening act. I told her I had a long day and I might stay late at work. She did not even ask where I would be. She just said okay, and glanced at her phone, like she was checking if her day would still fit neatly into her calendar. And that told me everything I needed to know. I drove to my office, sat in the parking lot, and called my bank. I asked for the account activity. I asked for recent login attempts. I asked for any linked devices. The representative spoke in that soft, professional tone, and I kept my own voice steady, like I was calling about a missing package. Not my whole financial life. There had been an attempt to change the recovery email. There had been a failed security question. There had been a request to add a new authorized user. I asked for the timestamps. I wrote them down. And the times lined up with Marissa being home. Not me. The representative asked if I wanted to freeze the account. And I said not yet. I asked to set up additional security and a verbal passphrase. And I made it something ridiculous that only I would remember. Because if I was going to be betrayed, I was at least going to enjoy myself a little. Then I called my credit card company, then my credit reporting agencies, and I placed a fraud alert. I did it like a checklist, calm and methodical. I was not spiraling, I was organizing. There is a difference. Spiraling is when you lose control. Organizing is when you refuse to lose it. After that, I called an attorney. Not the first one I found. Not the one with the flashiest website. But the one a coworker had used during a messy divorce. He had told me the lawyer was a shark. And I decided I could use a shark. I met her that afternoon. Her office was quiet and smelled faintly like coffee and determination. She looked at me and said, "Tell me everything," and I did. I kept it factual. The open relationship request, my refusal, the changes, the threats, the bank email, the preview message, her warning that she would take everything. The attorney listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question that made me sit up straighter. She said, "Do you have documentation?" I said some. And she nodded like that was a start, but not enough. She said, "We are going to build a timeline. We are going to secure your assets. And we are going to stop her from painting you into a villain. Because in divorce court, the truth matters. But the story matters too." I told her I was not interested in revenge. I just wanted fairness. She smiled slightly and said fairness is a wonderful goal, but we will prepare for warfare without doing anything that crosses a line. And I appreciated that, because I did not want to become someone I would not respect just to win. When I got home, Marissa was on the couch, laptop open. She looked up quickly and then looked away too quickly, which was almost comedic. Like she had been rehearsing innocent behavior and forgot the timing. She said, "How was work?" I said, "Busy." Then I sat down across from her, and I said, "We need to be clear. We are divorcing." She snapped her laptop shut and said, "You are still on that," like divorce was a diet I had failed to stick to. I said, "Yes, I am still on that." She leaned forward and said, "Do you really want to throw away our life because you cannot handle growth?" I stared at her and said, "Growth is not a code word for disrespect." She scoffed and said, "You are so old-fashioned." I said, "Maybe, but at least I am honest." She said, "I am honest too." And I said, "No, you are loud. There is a difference." Then she hit me with a new tactic. She softened her face, put on a sad little expression, and said, "We can fix this. We can go to counseling." I almost laughed. Not because counseling is a joke, but because her timing was, she wanted counseling after she was caught. After she threatened me, after she started trying to access accounts. That is not healing. That is damage control. I said no, and she stared at me like I had stolen something from her. Then she said, "Fine. You want a divorce. We will do it my way." And she stood up and walked to our bedroom, and I heard drawers opening. Not in the frantic way of someone grabbing a sweater, but in the calculated way of someone collecting items. I followed and found her pulling out a folder from our filing cabinet. She had our marriage certificate, our house deed, insurance papers, and she was stacking them like a librarian building a case. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Preparing." And I said, "Leave those." She said, "They are half mine." And I said, "We will share copies, not the originals." She looked at me and said, "You do not get to control me." And I said, "I am not controlling you. I am controlling my future." She slammed the folder shut and said, "You think you are so smart." And I said, "I know I am not dumb," which is the most honest sentence I had said in weeks. That night I slept in the guest room. Not because I was defeated, but because I refused to share a bed with someone who treated commitment like a trend. And around 2 in the morning, I heard her on the phone, her voice low, the words muffled. But I caught pieces. Lawyer, strategy, he does not know. We will get the house. I sat up, fully awake, and I smiled, because she was wrong about one key detail I did know. And the next morning, I began the quiet audit. I photographed every important document. I stored copies in a secure place she did not know existed. I downloaded statements. I saved emails. I took screenshots of account attempts. I compiled the timeline like my attorney told me. I did not hack anything. I did not snoop through messages that were private. I focused on what was ours and what was legally relevant. And then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten again. A new bank transfer scheduled from our joint savings to an account number I did not recognize. It was set for the following day. It was not huge, but it was deliberate. And that is when the suspense stopped being emotional and started being logistical. I called my attorney immediately. She said, "Do not panic, but act now." And she guided me through freezing the transfer, documenting it, and setting up a temporary order request with the court, so assets could not be moved around like chess pieces. When I hung up, I felt oddly steady, like I had stepped onto solid ground after weeks of walking on ice. Marissa came into the kitchen and saw my laptop open, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Protecting myself." She narrowed her eyes and said, "You are plotting." I said, "No, I am responding." She smiled again, but this time it was sharper. She said, "You will lose," and I said, "Maybe, but I will not lose quietly." She walked out, and my phone buzzed. A notification from a service I had not used in years. It said a new device has accessed your cloud storage, and the location was our living room. And I realized she was not just trying to take money. She was trying to take the narrative, and I had to stop her before she rewrote my life into a story where she was the hero and I was the obstacle. And I had one advantage left. Something she did not know I had saved months ago. Back when she first started talking about modern thinking. Back when my instincts whispered that I should record dates and words, just in case. And I had listened. Now I just needed to use it at the right moment. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because if she wanted court, I was going to show up with facts, not feelings. And the next twist arrived sooner than I expected. Delivered by a knock on our front door and a man holding an envelope like it weighed nothing at all. The hearing arrived quietly, like a test you forgot to be nervous about. I walked into the courthouse feeling steady, not brave, not angry, just ready. Marissa arrived 10 minutes late, wearing confidence like perfume. She smiled at me as if we were about to share a joke instead of a legal boundary. Her lawyer spoke first, painting a picture where I was rigid, outdated, and emotionally limiting. I listened without reacting because reacting was what they wanted. Then my lawyer stood and spoke calmly about timelines, documentation, and consistency. She did not attack. She clarified. She did not dramatize, she organized. I watched the judge read through papers, pausing more often on our side. Marissa shifted in her seat every time silence stretched. Silence is heavy when you expect applause. When it was over, the judge issued temporary orders that split access evenly and denied exclusive control requests. Marissa's smile disappeared completely this time. Outside, she confronted me saying, "You planned this." I said, "No, I prepared for it." She said, "You are trying to make me look bad." I said, "Your actions are doing that without my help." She scoffed and said, "This is not over." I said, "You are right, but it is no longer one-sided." She walked away, fast heels, clicking like punctuation she could not control. I stood there for a moment, realizing something important. The power she had relied on was surprise, and once that was gone, she had nothing but noise. I went home feeling lighter, not because I had won, but because I had stopped losing. And that night I slept, knowing the next phase would reveal more than she intended. Because pressure always does, and I was finally calm enough to watch it happen. The final hearing did not feel final when it began. It felt procedural, like everyone expected another round of noise. Marissa arrived composed but tense, like someone holding a smile together with effort. Her lawyer spoke again, confident but faster this time, rushing through points as if speed could blur details. Then the judge asked questions. Calm, precise questions that did not accuse but invited clarity. Dates were mentioned, documents referenced, inconsistencies highlighted without drama. My lawyer responded slowly, giving space for the truth to sit in the room. Marissa was asked to explain a transfer attempt she had described as routine. She hesitated, then spoke, and that hesitation said more than her words. She was asked about statements she had made regarding taking everything. She said she had been emotional. The judge nodded and said, "Emotions are understandable, but actions matter." The room felt smaller then quieter. When the ruling came, it was balanced, fair, and unmistakably grounded in facts. Assets would be divided equitably, no exclusive control, no penalties, but no rewards for manipulation either. Marissa stared straight ahead, as if looking at something far away. Outside, she did not yell, she did not threaten, she simply said, "I did not think you would fight like this. I said I did not think I would need to." And that was the most honest thing I could offer. She walked away slower this time, and I realized the battle had never been about winning. It had been about refusing to disappear. And in that moment I knew whatever came next would finally be mine to choose. The divorce finalized without fireworks, just signatures and quiet acknowledgments that something had ended exactly as it should. Marissa did not get everything she wanted, and I did not lose what mattered. The house was sold cleanly, the accounts divided fairly, and the noise faded faster than I expected. People stopped asking questions once they saw I was not interested in performing pain. Marissa moved on quickly, at least publicly, posting about freedom and new chapters and growth. I wished her well silently because resentment is heavy, and I had already carried enough weight. What surprised me was how light my life felt afterward. Mornings were calmer choices, clearer laughter, easier. I realized I had not just defended my finances. I had defended my sense of self. I had learned that love without respect is just habit, and habit can be broken. I did not win by taking something from her. I won by keeping myself intact. The dignity, the calm, the clarity. Those were never on the table for negotiation. And in the end, when people asked how I survived it, I told them the truth. I paid attention, I prepared, and I refused to confuse modern excuses with timeless accountability. And that was enough. More than enough. Because the real victory was walking forward without bitterness. Knowing I had stood my ground and come out honest, whole, and finally free.